As another year comes to a close and a new one begins, a new year of importable cars opens up for the car enthusiasts and import specialty dealers that can afford them. As 2025 begins, the import options find themselves at the turn of our current century, the year 2000. Boy bands were in vogue, high schools had silly hats and Jinko jeans, people were listening to Limp Bizkit of their own free will, and people who didn't live in the US were being treated to a menagerie of unique and interesting cars that never officially came stateside. But now, thanks to the United States' 25-year import regulations, these cars can now finally experience American shores, if anyone is brave enough to drag them over here and try them out. In this video, I'm going to point out a handful of cars that I think are relatively interesting from the year 2000 and that can now be imported. I'll go over regular cars, special interests, and sports cars, and then at the end I'll cover a couple of oddities. So stay tuned after the intro graphic and let's see what you can import for 2025. So let's get this started right away and talk about the regular cars first. I know, some people will say these are boring or uninteresting, or why would you want that? Look, if it wasn't sold here, someone might find it interesting enough to pursue. And also, remember the 25-year import rule is based off of the manufacturing date of the car. So if it says it is a model year of 2000, but wasn't built until July of 2000, you'd have to wait until at least of July 2025 then to actually get the car imported, or at least start the import process for getting on to our shores. So anyway, first let me introduce the Toyota Opel, which is about as safe of an import that you can get. It's odd looking but not super flashy, comes with tried and true turn-of-the-century Toyota motors and transmissions, including a 1.8 liter or 2 liter inline 4, and could even come in all-wheel drive with the 1.8 liter engine option. It even could come with a cute little wing on the top. The Opel was originally introduced in 1999 at the Tokyo Motor Show, apparently because someone wanted to see the Toyota Vista Ardeo wagon, which was actually just a Camry wagon transformed into a stouter hatchback for some reason. Still, it's different, it's safe, and it's relatively cheap. Production began in January of 2000 and ended in July of 2005, so you can start looking for these pretty much immediately. Next, and relatively safe, is the Holden Commodore VX generation, which was a part of the Commodore's third generation. Now, many car enthusiasts are probably already aware of the Commodore, as many have probably seen the rebadged Pontiac G8s and Chevy SS sedans. Those, however, were fourth generation cars. The VX Commodores came equipped with a modified version of the Buick 3.8 L36 engine that was worked into a rear drive setup. And, unlike the US, a rear-drive supercharged variant of that motor was also available, as well as a V8 option later in its run. Although it's true the US did get rear-drive Buick 3.8s, that was in the Firebird and the Camaro, we did not get supercharged versions. And if you like the old Aussie Ute, you're in luck, there was a Ute variation just called the Ute. And if Australia is too far away to import from, or if the pickings don't seem too good, GM did sell some rebadged variants in closer markets, including the Chevrolet Omega in Brazil. More off the beaten path, but still pretty regular, let's also consider something from Malaysia, who does in fact make real cars alongside their Hot Wheel factories. May of 2000 saw the introduction of the Proton Waja, or Waja, however it's pronounced, or as it was also called in the UK, the Proton Impian. Production continued until 2012 with nearly 300,000 Wajas ultimately built. The earliest engine choice and the bulk of all sales was a 1.6 liter 4-pot from Mitsubishi, later replaced by a Proton-built unit which was then replaced by a Renault 1.8 liter engine later in life. Although some early Wajas also had a different Renault power unit earlier on. The platform was also borrowed from Mitsubishi, being used to underpin the Charisma, as well as being used by the Volvo S40. This is a pretty basic car, but it has unique looks, and more than that, the Mitsu engines of that era weren't too shabby, and parts for them should be locatable. Furthermore, the Waja has a little racing blood in it, with the Waja being used as the basis of Proton's entry into the 2002 through 2004 seasons of the British Touring Car Championship. Although out of 95 races, Proton's Impian race car only secured 2 victories, although that's still better than 0. 2000 was also the year of the second generation of Ford Mondeo. The first generation of the car was available in the US actually as the Ford Contour. However, the second gen never came to the US in its normal Ford form, instead arriving in the disguise of the Jaguar X-Type. Although the X-Type could be found with the new Ford Duratec 3-liter V6 and a 5-speed stick or auto, as well as a useful all-wheel drive system, it was still more of a luxury car than a true sports sedan. And by that, I mean the Ford Mondeo you want is the ST220, with 223 horsepower V6 and the 6-speed manual, plus all the other good racy suspension bits. The aforementioned 3-liter V6 in the Jag was actually developed for the ST220, itself an upgraded version of the Mondeo ST. Not only that, but if a sedan isn't to your taste, the ST220 also came as a liftback and a wagon. Now, if reliability isn't a big concern of yours, then good news. 2000 was the debut year of the Alfa Romeo 147 hatchback. The 147 was a replacement for the 3-door 146 hatchback, and unlike the 146, which was only available in a 3-door layout, the 147 was available as both a 3-door and a 5-door hatch. Two relatively low-powered engine offerings included the fuel-sipping 1.6-liter and 1.9-liter engines, gas and diesel respectively. The best and most common engine option was the 2-liter twin-spark 4-cylinder. Actually, most Alfa fans consider this engine both reliable and easy to maintain, and offered a respectable 150 horsepower. This engine found its way into various cars between the 90s and early 2000s, so parts shouldn't be the hardest to find either. The only other thing to mention here is that the best and most sought-after version of the 147 is actually the 2-liter V6 powered GTA. But that did not come out until 2002, which means we still have 2 years to go to readily import one of those. A shame, really. However, if a hatchback isn't big enough for your interests, then let's bring up the Buick GL8. Now hold on, a Buick. How is there a Buick that didn't come stateside? Easy. The answer is China. Now, Buick did sell a minivan in the US for a while called the Terrazza, built on GM's U platform, which was the basis for a variety of badge-engineered minivans, including the Chevy Uplander and the Pontiac Montana SB6. The GL8, meanwhile, while also on the U platform, was more closely related to the older Chevy Ventura minivan. The GL8, however, was arguably much more upscale and was likely responsible for pushing the idea in China that minivans were luxury vehicles for transporting important people who relaxed in these spacious back seating areas. Now, the GL8 did technically go into production for 1999, but not until late December, so consider this a technicality. But if you want an uncommon, rare, and luxury-centered minivan from 2000, then the GL8 is the car for you if you can find one. The GL8 is actually still made today and entered its 4th generation as of 2022. Those cars are all too modern for you. Maybe. Well, if you like older styled regular cars that were out of date when they came out, and if you really desire the Dacia Duster,
Dacia,
which has yet to come stateside, then fill that gap in your heart with the Dacia SupeRNova. And I am pronouncing it like it's spelled. As it happens, the SupeRNova is actually a facelift of the previous Nova liftback, but it's also the first car to be sold by Dacia after Renault took them over in 1999. As such, the SupeRNova was given a brand new Renault engine, a 1.4-liter 4-cylinder that made a truly exhilarating 74 horsepower out of a 5-speed manual gearbox. Certainly an odd little car, maybe a bit dry, but at least no one will know what it is, least of all your mechanic. The car ended production after 2003, and 2002 saw the introduction of the Campus trim, which was supposed to be sportier somehow. If you want standard AC, look for the Clima trim. Okay, but the regular cars are a bit tiring. You want to see the cool stuff, the exotics. Where are the sport cars? Where's the really cool, unique stuff that one can aspire to afford and own? Where's the cars one can fantasize about dropping lottery money on? Let's get to them. First, let's check out the Opel Speedster. This was a joint effort between Lotus and the GM-owned German marque Opel, with the goal being a concept car-looking mid-engine roadster based on the Lotus Elise. The Speedster featured a longer wheelbase and utilized GM's Chevy Ecotec engine with 145 horsepower, mated to a 5-speed Getrag manual transmission. With a lightweight aluminum frame and a final curb weight of slightly over 1,900 pounds, you ended up with a stylish mix of German, British, and GM engineering that actually ended up being more powerful than the Elise it was based on. Slightly over 7,200 Speedsters were produced in all, with a handful of them sold as right-hand drive units in the UK as the Vauxhall VX220. If you seek a little more power, you'll have to wait 4 more years to import the turbocharged variant from 2004. Furthermore, you may also want to check out the track-oriented Vauxhall VXR220, which featured even more power than the turbo model, 220 horsepower compared to the turbo's 200, and a variety of track-focused upgrades regarding the brakes and suspension. However, only 60 of those track-focused Vauxhalls exist. Now, if you want an actual Lotus, and not just a Lotus-based car, then let me point out the extremely limited Lotus 340R, which was essentially a road-legal race car. These little track-focused roadsters weighed just over 1,500 pounds and came equipped with a Rover K-Series engine tuned for either 177 or 187 brake horsepower, both with sub-5 second 0 to 60 times. Only 340 of these cars were produced solely for the 2000 model year, and it's believed there's less than that number of surviving cars today. Supposedly, a total of 11 or so came to the United States. One was even offered on Bring a Trailer. The legality of them as road cars is kind of vague in the US, given those particular models, and they might have all been gray imports. Also, wherever those cars are now isn't quite certain. And continuing on the topic of British roadsters, because they apparently made a lot around this period, let's bring up the modern Morgan, the Aero 8. This was Morgan's attempt to bring one of their models into the modern age with modern construction techniques, such as the use of a metal frame as opposed to their traditional wooden tub. And then they threw a BMW V8 into it just to make it insane, although it was still weighing in at 2,600 pounds or thereabout. Technically, the Aero 8 did actually come to the US, but not until 2004. Morgans have always been an interesting topic as they've changed a little from their classic design language over the years, leading some to argue if they're neoclassics or not. Although to some degree it can be argued that the Aero 8 was an attempt to modernize their design language as well. You can get them as a coupe, a target top, or as a straight-up roadster. If you're willing to brave a BMW V8 from the turn of the century and aren't satisfied with what's currently available with what's already in the US, rest assured this year you can start looking overseas. And now for something insanely exclusive, let's talk about the rare British-built Japanese unicorn, the Vemac RD180. Or is it Vemac? Regardless, this was the first road-going production car for Vemac, who otherwise focused on race car engineering. The internals were a mixture of Honda parts, including the 1.8-liter inline-4 from the Integra Type R, which was mounted longitudinally in the rear with a 5-speed transmission. With 180 horses on tap and weighing under 2,000 pounds, it was a quick little bugger. Exact production numbers are hard to come by, but it was very low volume, and only sold for 4 years between 2000 and 2004 when it was replaced by the RD200. However, if you're curious as to what markets to look in, it was pretty much only sold in the United Kingdom, where it was built, and Japan, where it was designed. From what I've been able to find, the RD200 had somewhat higher production numbers and was an exclusive for the Japanese market. However, if this is your car, good luck on the treasure hunt and be prepared to learn the history of Vemac so when people ask you what it is, you can actually tell them what it is. Because nobody is going to know what this is. And with that, let's move into what's probably maybe more affordable fare, but it's only if you can find them, and a couple of relative oddballs that are just simply unique. And all of these are potentially impossible to find. However, on the slightly less odd side, and probably the easiest to come by, but also actually one of the more expensive cars in this group, it's the Toyota Origin. This was a limited mid-size car related to the Toyota Altezza, which to us Americans was the early 2000s Lexus IS. It came about during Japan's interest in retro neoclassical styling and could be in some ways considered a successor to the Toyota Classic. The unique 50s styling was an homage to the 55 Toyopet Crown, one of Toyota's earlier successes. It's rear-wheel drive, powered by a 3-liter 2JZ, and has a 4-speed auto, and is that classy kind of Toyota luxury from the turn of the century. Dare I say it, I think this one actually looks really good. Probably helps that it went all in on the styling and didn't do some half-assed Mitsuoka type job. Made between May of 2000 and April of 2001, 1,073 cars total were built, so hopefully there's a decent number of survivors still out there. Although it featured plenty of your JDM tuning crowd hooner delights, the car's styling likely warded off the type who would have harped on these too much. which means you should be able to find a decent example fresh enough for you to hoon on it all you want. It's a Toyota, go nuts. And if turn-of-the-century EV runabouts are your thing, maybe see if you can find the Think City. This little quirky hatch has 30 miles of range on a full charge and offers seating for two. And before you go to the comments, yes, I'm aware the Think City was sold in the US and they can still be found here. However, that would be the second generation of cars sold from 2010 to 2012. I'm talking about the first generation of cars, which actually also was sold in the US, but only as a limited time demo car, primarily in California and New York. Once their demo time was up, all first generation Think Cities were taken back to Norway, which is where they were built, with cooperation from Ford, and then they were sold into the public. However, apparently only half of these cars were actually sold back, the other half destroyed. So while Wikipedia claims only 370 of these cars were built, there are likely far fewer left today. And although a second generation car would make miles more sense to pursue, as it's a better car in virtually every way, a first gen Think City would be something interesting to show up in for a cars and coffee or stuff into a museum. I guarantee you will not bump into a second one in the United States. Bonus points if you can find one that was actually originally sold in the United States and then taken back to Norway. It'd be like bringing it back home or something. Or, I don't know, something. And to end this list, here are a pair of off-roaders that I think are rather interesting because unique 4x4s are pretty cool. Starting with the Mahindra Bolero. Mahindra made licensed Jeeps way back in the day, and to this day they continue to make vehicles based on Jeeps. You could argue that they are basically India's Jeep brand. The Bolero was a smaller offering available in rear-wheel or four-wheel drive and was meant to serve rural communities and came in a variety of body styles, including a pickup. Most are four doors and kind of look like a Suzuki Jimny crossed with a Jeep Commander. Maybe a little Mitsubishi Montero thrown in for good measure. And all of this powered by either a naturally aspirated or turbocharged diesel Peugeot engine. Peugeot reliability jokes aside, it was an engine found in all manner of cars, so parts I think should be easy to find. The Bolero can make for a very interesting conversation piece or make for a unique off-road build. The Bolero is still made today, now with in-house Mahindra engines, and over 1 million of these things have been built, so finding one probably shouldn't be difficult, and I doubt they're too expensive either. These were actually also sold in South America and the Philippines, although under different names. The Cimarron in South America, and it was called the Enforcer in the Philippines. I like the latter name better. And then finally, in this list of interesting cars, there is this rather tragic looking thing, the UMM Alter 2000. Or is it Well, I guess you can say UMM. It's an acronym for something I can't pronounce in Portuguese. These were meant to be simple, rugged off-roaders capable of performing a variety of tasks. And wouldn't you know it, this Portugal-built truck is also powered by a Peugeot diesel engine. Of course, the Alter 2000 was the final iteration of the UMM's Alter series of trucks, which had gone through several generations since 1977. Their most prosperous model was the Alter 2, a major redesign introduced in 1986 that had a variety of engine options and came with hardtops, soft tops, and plenty of then modern features. In fact, you could argue the vehicle looked older than it was, as most of its features were meant to directly rival that of the Land Rover Defender. But design simply didn't age as well, in my opinion. But today, that gives it a very distinct look. Not pretty, certainly ugly, but very unique. 1992 introduced BMW-sourced engines, both diesel and gas. By 1993, another refresh was offered, improving the vehicle further. However, UMM started to face financial downfall as the 90s wore on and market space was lost to competition. Finally, despite lacking the resources, UMM attempted a new model, which was, of course, the Alter 2000. The truck landed in 2000, although the name appears to be more likely derived from its single 2.1-liter Peugeot engine choice, and production struggled through 2004 as UMM simply ran out of money. As such, in 4 years, it's believed that only 25 Alter 2000s were ultimately produced. How many still exist is uncertain, but they're likely still all in Portugal. So if you want something you can say is only one of 25, then the Alter 2000 is for you, even if the reasoning for that isn't exactly a happy story for its maker. Well, anyways, there's your list. This doesn't cover every car or trim level or what have you available for import this year, but I guarantee some of these you've probably never heard of before, which makes them all the more interesting, at least in my eyes. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you return for whatever I release next, whenever that may be. So like, subscribe, leave a comment, and stay tuned, you and your cars.